Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, to this week's growth call, developer session. This week, we want to focus on the DAO and mainly on basically a Q&A and discussion about open questions. So, there are already quite a few videos out where we discussed all the basic concepts from a developer point of view. So if you're not familiar with this, please check out those videos first, and let's jump directly into any open questions. Florian, as I talked already with Christoph before, Florian and Thomas, did you have time to check out the DAO videos?
Yes, I enjoyed them very much.
I sadly didn't, but I read the docs.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, then let's jump directly into it. What are the open questions? What is unclear?
So, sorry. Can you hear me, Manfred?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish the last video on colored coins, as we discussed before the call, so I'm not sure if it's covered there. But yeah, it's clear for me regarding the initial Genesis transaction that we're just following all transaction outputs to find out what is a Bisq token, what is not. But if on every compensation in each voting cycle, we are creating new BSQ from scratch. So my question is, and you started to explain it before the call, how the generation, the coloring of these coins is created. So for the initial ones, it's the Genesis transaction, but for the new ones during each voting cycle, there must be also something similar, I guess.
Yeah, so conceptually, it's basically something similar like the Genesis transaction. So every contributor has the right to create a kind of like a dedicated small Genesis transaction. And the output of the Genesis transaction is BSQ. The real Genesis transaction is hard-coded, and by convention, everybody who uses BSQ is basically agreeing that they are accepting the consensus about this Genesis transaction. And from the issuance transaction from a contributor will be authorized by voting. So when you make your compensation request, you are creating a transaction where you put some Bitcoin Satoshis from your local Bitcoin wallet. You remember one BSQ is 100 Satoshi. So let's say you want to issue 10 BSQ, that's 1000 Satoshi. So you take 1000 Satoshi from your Bitcoin wallet and you send it to a BSQ address, to your BSQ wallet. And at this moment, it's just invalid because it doesn't have a root in the Genesis transaction or in another issuance transaction. So it's this output which points to a BSQ address is not considered valid BSQ. And after the voting, when you got voted OK from the network, then this output is considered as valid BSQ. Also, with the acceptance in voting, this compensation request transaction becomes a issuance transaction. Also, the transaction technically is the same, just the context. The context is different. Now it's this output is interpreted as BSQ, and you can spend it and you can sell it, and the same rules apply like with the Genesis transaction. All the following outputs of this one output is considered as BSQ. So to summarize again, it's basically the same concept like a Genesis transaction, just the Genesis transaction is hard-coded, and everybody agree by using the software that this is the valid Genesis transaction, and the issuance transaction is decided by voting. When you get voted OK, then it's from the network, you get the authorization basically that you have created new BSQ for this amount, what you have requested. And this particular transaction output is now like one output of a Genesis transaction.
And the information for this Genesis transactions is then persisted in the DAO state DB, or is it somewhere persisted?
Yeah. Also, the DAO state class is the basic model for all the DAO data, and for all the immutable DAO data, as with every block, data get added, but then it cannot be changed anymore. Or it's also not really correct, because you have something like the unspent transaction output map, which changes when you're spending some data. But it's basically the current state of your of the DAO blockchain related data. So yeah, there are other data like the peer-to-peer network data, like the compensation requests, and then the voting, the blind votes, and the blind votes. The vote reveal is only a transaction. So the whole DAO model consists of this DAO state, then the peer-to-peer network data like the blind vote and the compensation requests, and the transactions which are connected with this peer-to-peer network data, like the compensation request transaction, blind vote transaction, and the vote reveal transaction. The vote reveal transaction doesn't have a related peer-to-peer network data. There we are putting the data directly in the blockchain, as it's only the private, the secret key for decrypting the blind vote. And sorry, I lost a little bit your original question.
The question was just regarding where this information is stored, and the follow-up question is when we create a new version of the client, and we also bundle the current state of the DAO state. We use the newest kind of snapshot of Bitcoin J. This how is it called again?
No, it's not from Bitcoin J. It's just a snapshot from the DAO state, basically.
Yeah.
So
no, what I meant because each BSQ transaction is a transaction that is published to the Bitcoin blockchain, correct? Or is it wrong?
Yeah, but we are not using Bitcoin J for the DAO. Also, it's used in some areas, but not in relevant areas, not in the consensus part. In the consensus part, as when you run the DAO as a full node, as when you have your local Bitcoin core running and request the blocks over RPC, then yeah, you get it directly from Bitcoin core. You get all the full block with the 2,000 or more transactions, and you are passing all transactions for valid BSQ transactions. And only the BSQ transactions we persist, and we keep in this DAO state. And this DAO state, every 20 blocks, we are creating a new snapshot. And yeah, with that, we avoid that when you're restarting the application that you have to pass again all the past blocks. And we are delivering such snapshots with the binaries so that the user don't need to pass back from the Genesis transaction everything. He can do it. Also in the settings, you can delete the DAO state and then you are starting over again from the Genesis transaction. But of course, that takes some performance after at least a few months or a year. And when you're at the light node, you get the blocks from the seed nodes. It could be basically any node, but we are using the seed nodes for this because for convenience, basically. And they are sending you already the filtered blocks, so you get a list of blocks, but the blocks only contain the BSQ transactions. So one block usually contain only 1 or 2 or 3 transactions instead of 2,000, and with that, the data is much smaller what you are transferring. And the only trust or security issue here is that the seed node, a malicious seed node, could theoretically omit your data and not send you some transaction, and you don't learn about this transaction. It's similar like with in SPV mode. A full node could lie about don't give you some transaction, but he cannot give you an invalid transaction or put a transaction into a block which doesn't exist. And similar, it's here. And you're requesting this data from from several seed nodes in parallel. So it's very unlikely that you get some issues. Can be some stability issues or some reorg issues that the seed nodes are on a different fork when miners find blocks at the nearly same time and the blockchain is forking. It can be that two seed nodes are on different forks and then they are delivering different blocks, and it's basically inconsistent, the state. But yeah, the application would show this as a warning and would try to recover from the latest snapshot again. So when anything is out of sync or out of state, it basically goes back to the latest snapshot, which is 20 blocks back. And also with normal reworks, they are usually, I think, maximum 4 blocks deep. And then rebuild again at every new block. So as soon, when there would be the event that two seed nodes have a different block, then you try again. You have basically in the UI then some visual representation that you're not the network is not consistent. So you have to wait a little bit longer on the next block. Usually these reworks get resolved very quickly after 1 or 2 blocks. As soon as with every new block, you will try to rebuild it from the latest snapshot. And then when you arrive in a consistent state again, then everything is fine. Otherwise, you do it with the next block until it's resolved.
And because we bundle this latest snapshots with each release, we don't expect to have any performance issues. Let's say in a couple of years from now, we have thousands of additional Genesis transactions of different contributors that needs to be followed. But that shouldn't be a problem then?
Not really, because you are downloading. Also, you're even not you're just downloading the new blocks, which is missing. Also, you tell us the seed node what's your latest block. So when you are when we make a new release and the user is downloading the new release after 3 weeks, then he's downloading the blocks of 3 weeks, which is also not a lot of data, and especially because there are not thousands of BSQ transactions, hopefully, in the block.
Hopefully there are thousands of BSQ transactions.
Yeah, then we have a scalability issue probably, because then we have to. But yeah, I think that's not a blockchain. That would be another problem, but that will not happen. So
that was the question. So, sorry.
Also, there have been some performance issues with that the UI gets stuck. But as far as I've seen, and I investigated a few weeks ago, it's mainly that the UI is doing too much work and is not optimized at the moment. Like some lists get refilled and get filtered instead of one time many times, and need to be optimized and fixed. And before when you're getting all this batch of blocks, when you get whatever 500 blocks from the seed node, then you are passing every block. And before we were triggering the UI and the listeners as every block when a block were fully passed, and that caused a lot of performance. Also, I think it was something it took for 1 week or so. It took 1 minute to pass, and basically the UI was stuck for 1 minute. And after the optimization, it was something like 2 seconds or so. And the only real change was that we were not calling the listeners at every block, but at the end of the pass of the batch processing. So after the last block has been finished and you're done with the whole batch, then you're calling all the listeners and then they're updating, and then it's only one time a hit, and there is still a lot of optimization possibilities. The parsing itself is very fast, and even there also pass itself can be optimized, but that's very dangerous code. It's all consensus critical, and I don't think that there is a lot of overhead. Also, I think on the UI side, how we are filling the lists and how we are filling the tables and creating, especially in the vote results, there are some complex objects what we need to create just for the UI. And the creation of these objects and the passing through all the data, or not the passing, the collecting of all the data and putting it into the new form which we need for displaying it in the UI, that's not optimized at all at the moment, and has to be optimized, and there we probably can get out the most of performance. I mean, there are some scalability limits, I said, yeah, when there are really a lot of transactions. I think even after 10 years, it shouldn't be an issue when there are not too many transactions in one block, because yeah, you just get all the old data. It's also you get the snapshot. It would be only issue when you want to rebuild it from Genesis, but then it's like Bitcoin Core. When you want to rebuild the whole blockchain, it takes you 2 days or whatever. In Bisq, hopefully it will not take 2 days, but maybe it takes then 1 hour. But that's not required. When you want to do it, when you don't want to trust the developers that they have put in the correct snapshot, then you can do it. And when you trust the developers, you don't need to do it. But it's, of course, by default made easy that users should be able to do it easily. And hopefully some do it to have double checking. And yeah, when we would put in a wrong snapshot with some invalid transaction, it would easily be detected that some users complain that they get a different result, and we need to figure out what's going wrong.
Okay, so for people who update on a regular basis, so each month, when we say we have a release each 1 or 2 months, then it shouldn't take more than, let's say, 30 seconds or a minute to get in sync again.
I think it should be even less. I think the pure parsing where the UI get more or less stuck because we're running it on the UI frame, UI thread. I tried to use threading for the parsing initially, but it ended up in threading hell and so much complications and risks that I prefer to not do it. And as I found out that the parsing itself is not the bottleneck, it's quite fast. Yeah, and so I think the first thing to optimize it would be to fix this data aggregation and preparation in the UI. I think there is 90% of the performance burned at the moment. And when we still have issues, we could try to make some kind of like delayed execution that to give the UI some time for rendering again. But I think it's not the problem. And a user who has not used Bisq for half a year and started again, he will get stuck anyway from Bitcoin J side. Also, then Bitcoin J will take not only 1 minute, but probably 3, 4, 5 minutes to catch up and to sync. And then the CPU is on 100% for this time. And the UI is super, super irresponsible, even if it's a different thread and so. But yeah, it takes just all the performance. So I would not care too much about those users who don't use Bisq on a regular basis. They get a little bit of performance hit, but it's already now the case, and there's no easy workaround for this.
Okay, yeah, thanks. The other question I had, you mentioned that then transactions are sent to a BSQ address. So that means that there is this kind of address and transactions. So if I look into a regular Bitcoin block explorer, will I see then the BSQ address there as well? Yeah, so in Bisq we have 2 wallets, the BSQ wallet and the Bitcoin wallet. Technically it's Bitcoin wallets. Bitcoin J doesn't know about BSQ. It's just on, we're using this BIP44, which have different branches for the coins. Also Bitcoin is, I think, 0, and then any color coin has a different number, and I think we have 142 or something. And so with that, both wallets use the same root and the same seed words. So they are technically built from the same root, but the addresses sit on a different branch, and the public keys are really different. So you could not, by accident, import a BSQ address keys into another wallet and then spend it as Bitcoin. That was the main reason why we used the BIP44, to get additional security when some people don't know about it, and just try to import it in Electrum or some other wallet and then spend it as normal Bitcoin. They would destroy the BSQ and can be a lot of money then. And with this BIP44, that's not possible. And where is it written down? Which the BSQ tokens on which branch they are positioned in the HD wallet? That's hard-coded.
Yeah, that's in the Bitcoin package, the management of the two wallets and the startup of creating the two wallets are two different files, but as said, they are using the same seed words for usability, basically, that the user don't need to make 2 times a backup of the seed words. But because they're living on different branches in the hierarchical deterministic wallet structure, you cannot make a mistake by importing the BSQ keys and use it as a Bitcoin key. And yeah, when you send or when you create any transaction, any BSQ transaction, it always contains some Bitcoin inputs and some BSQ inputs. I mean, not always BSQ input, like when you create the compensation, also for the fee, you need BSQ inputs. Yeah, the Bitcoin input is always required for the mining fee because we don't want to pay mining fees with BSQ. That would be very expensive. So when you create a transaction, you always start by preparing your BSQ part, the inputs. Then you give this partial transaction to the BSQ wallet. You are adding the required inputs from the Bitcoin. You're putting it to the Bitcoin wallet service, and you are adding the required inputs for the mining fee from the Bitcoin wallet, and then you return the partial transaction, and as you sign it from the Bitcoin, the Bitcoin input gets signed already at this moment, and then you give it back, and then at the end, the BSQ wallet will sign its input, and then the transaction gets published.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. The last question. Yeah, sorry. The last question I have. Sorry. Yeah. The last question I have is then regarding uncoloring. Do we have this kind of case? Also, that's the case when we burn them, or is the burning of the BSQ a different process?
No, burning is uncoloring. It's still not really. Yeah, we still have not really a good term. Uncoloring is more correct. Like burning, we are not destroying it. We are converting. Yeah, we are uncoloring. As Bitcoin will convert it back. BSQ will get converted back to Bitcoin and lose the BSQ value in that event, but the Bitcoin value is still used as mining fee. So like in a trade fee transaction, so when the user is paying the trade fee in BSQ, he adds some BSQ input, and then let's say, and there we can burn as small amounts like 1 Satoshi. So usually you cannot transfer small amounts like the dust limit, that's 546 Satoshi, and that's 5.46 BSQ. So that's the smallest amount what you can send to somebody. When you buy some BSQ, you cannot buy 2 BSQ because that's below the dust limit and nobody can send you this. But for burning or for uncoloring or untagging BSQ, you can use as small amounts as 1 Satoshi. Let's assume we have a trading fee of 1 Satoshi. So you have maybe 1 UTXO in BSQ with 5,000 Satoshi. So you put this as an input, and then you create a change output with 4,999 Satoshi to another BSQ address of your own wallet. And then the rest is just Bitcoin input and outputs, change outputs for the mining fee. And this 1 Satoshi, which is missing, as a rule is that the first outputs are considered BSQ as long as there is enough input in BSQ is covering this. So when the pass is going over this transaction, it looks okay. We have an output with 4,999 to a BSQ address, and we have a total BSQ input of 5,000. So that's larger, like the output. That's everything okay. So the first output is considered as BSQ. Then it goes to the second output, which is then the change output for the Bitcoin. That's whatever, let's say 10,000 Satoshi or so. We have one 1 Satoshi left is on the input side, but the output is 10,000 Satoshi, so that's much larger, like we have available. So automatically that's considered as Bitcoin and not as BSQ anymore. And this 1 Satoshi, the difference, is then basically what is burned or what is uncolored, and that will be added as mining fee, so that we are not, that we do something useful with it. And the you pay 1 Satoshi less mining fee from your Bitcoin input, and you're using then this BSQ. This 1 Satoshi from the BSQ input as mining fee, and that's it. The miners are blind regarding BSQ. For them, this BSQ input is just a Bitcoin input, and they don't understand anything of BSQ, of course. And by that, we are uncoloring the BSQ value back to the Bitcoin value, and with that are burning the value difference. I mean, of course, 1 Satoshi has also a tiny value in Bitcoin. Let's say it's 1% of a dollar cent, but the BSQ value of 1 Satoshi would be maybe whatever 10 cent, and the difference between the 10 cent and the 1% of a dollar cent is what the money was get destroyed, also the economic money, and like the mining fee, and what the user really paid at the end as mining fee.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And this uncoloring, that's a core concept for the economic model, because with that we're creating the deflation, as we are taking out coins of circulation. When there are 4 million BSQ initially, and you have burned 1 Satoshi in a trade transaction, then there is 1 Satoshi less available, and every BSQ holder is a little bit more rich because there's a little bit less coins in supply.
Okay.
Hi, Naiman.
Thanks for explaining.
Hi, Naiman.
Yeah, hey, how are you?
Fine. Feel free also to jump in if you want to add anything, or if you have any questions. We are doing a Q&A basically for the DAO. Anything what's unclear, and
I'm gonna listen for now. I think I don't have any questions at the moment. Thank you.
Florian and Thomas, do you have any questions?
No, I'm basically quite clear. Maybe there is something coming up in the next weeks, but as of now, everything is crystal.
Great. Thomas, do you?
I was thinking, you were mentioning the last growth call or the two before, that it would be maybe a good idea to have a testnet faucet for Bisq, and I was wondering how hard would it be to do that? That's kind of a question.
Sorry, I didn't understand completely. It would be a good idea to
have a testnet faucet for BSQs.
I'm not sure if it's worth the effort, because it's just for a few weeks, hopefully. I mean, we hopefully can launch soon on mainnet. And I think, of course, we want to get as many testers as possible. Yeah. If you have any idea how to do it without a lot of effort, feel free.
I was thinking, I'm not sure. So if I would just have a Bitcoin testnet wallet, like it would be enough for it to manage the BSQ if I'm making sure that.
That's quite complicated. Also technically you could create with any application or any software, you can create transactions which are BSQ transaction, but you have to follow exactly all the rules. And when you make a tiny mistake, it's destroyed BSQ, which wouldn't be a big issue now with testnet. But I would not recommend.
Right now, when somebody wants to have testnet BSQ, he has to ask in the Slack, right?
Yeah.
You can just make a form. We can just make a form in the website which doesn't do anything besides sending us an email, and then somebody sends manually.
Yeah, I mean, there are more and more people who have already BSQ now, so I think it's already quite faster when somebody posts on the forum or in Slack that in a few hours at least you get some BSQ from somebody. I mean, and to get back, Thomas, I remember you asked also regarding an API. So at the moment, there is no API for the DAO. Maybe it will get added at some point. I'm not very, also I mean, basically, of course, it would be good to have alternative implementations and so on. Also, that's all the theory, but we see in Ethereum what can happen quickly and so on. And in Bitcoin, and Satoshi himself, he said that it can be very quickly a pain in the ass. So for the Bisq DAO, when we would have now, for instance, when you would work on whatever, a Python version for a BSQ wallet where you implement all the rules and you can handle it, then with every change what I do and every optimization I do, we have to manage if I'm not breaking anything of your version. There can be some bugs. When I fix this bug, I have to take care. Yeah, we have to maintain them, basically bugs that are. It's that because we cannot guarantee that some users of this wallet are working with this, or when some exchange would use then such a software, and we cannot easily update and change things without larger coordination, and that would just be a pain in the ass at the end and doesn't add at the moment, I think, value. I mean, when the DAO is very stable, so I assume maybe in 1 year or so, when fully battle tested and stable, I see it less problematic. Like at the moment it would be, I wouldn't like to deal with this because it would be just make life much harder.
What I thought at first, I thought that the BSQ itself has like an API for the wallet itself that would make like the faucet really easy, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, when you have some BSQ, you can send it. You always have to take care how you manage the outputs. Like for instance, with some wallets where the outputs get randomly mixed, I think in Electrum that's by default the case. You would already easily burn some BSQ because when the output would be before the BSQ output, the BSQ output is probably invalid then when it's too small.
No, what I meant is like we have the BSQ in Bisq, right? Like the wallet itself. So it would be nice to export an API with which you can interact with the wallet, just the wallet. That's what I'm saying. So no new wallet implementation, just exposing the existing one.
Yeah, I mean, the whole API project is, I have not heard much in the last weeks. And I mean, when the API is really in place with all the login security and everything, it shouldn't be a big deal, basically, to just, I mean, just domain classes which you have to access from the API and expose whatever you need and wrap it to some value objects. It's probably not difficult to do it. At the moment, I said, and when there are, I mean, of course, with this faucet, it would be a very limited use case. But when there would be an API for the BSQ, we have to take care of the API users, and it's already would introduce already this kind of coordination problem and risks with update when you fix something or change something, which you're not controlling your environment anymore 100%. I mean, at the moment, I can, when I know that the only users are using BSQ or the DAO over the Bisq application, we have all the control there, and we can test it. What happens with the old non-updated wallet to manage backward compatibility and so on. When there would be an API, we have different test scenarios, what we have to consider. It's just makes everything much more complex, and it's already super complex. I mean, especially backward compatibility. And so it's just a small note. So the address is basically a Bitcoin address. We are just using in the UI the prefix with the B. So when you want to look up a BSQ transaction in the normal block explorer, you just take the address and remove the B at the beginning, and then it's a Bitcoin address. The transactions are normal Bitcoin transactions anyway. And the B is just to avoid mistakes that the user is sending Bitcoin to the BSQ wallet or the other way around, which is West, and to help avoid problems. When users are trying to implement their own stuff and play around, it's completely on their they have to know what to do and really study the implementation, and the tech spec is not enough because it's not well maintained. I didn't have time to update all the details. So the code is the only real spec at the end. So when somebody play around with it and create a transaction outside of the BSQ software, he's completely responsible for himself. And when BSQ get burned, it's his bad luck. And it can easily happen, as it's quite complex to do it correctly. And I don't recommend anybody to do it at the current moment, at least.
But Thomas, maybe for this use case on testnet, maybe it's enough if we have an instance running with enough offers to buy BSQ, because you can buy BSQ in the testnet and in the client by using testnet Bitcoin, which you can access get through Bitcoin faucets. So maybe we could use that and push that there are offers available. So we test also the trading process in more detail.
It's still that the user has to be online. Like I have been at the beginning more online with my nodes, but recently not. And maybe let me think.
Yeah, that was the point. So we need an instance that is available all the time, that has enough offers to be taken.
I mean,
of course, if no one is sitting in front of the instance, then it's the same problem again, no matter if it's online or not. But yeah,
when the API would be already ready with the whole trade, we could do it basically and even share the access to it. Anybody can click basically on completing the trade, but yeah, that's not the case. And I mean, it's just now for before until we launch our mainnet. So I assume it's not worth the effort, and it's for sure not really trivial. So maybe it takes 4, 5, 6 weeks work, and then we're launching anyway, hopefully. But I mean, if you're interested to help us on the DAO side, there is for sure a lot to do. Maybe we can have a direct conversation, and I need to think a little bit more what can be done exactly. You are not really a Java developer, or you're more JavaScript and Python guy, or Thomas?
Yeah, JavaScript. I do not know Java.
Okay. Yeah, because Bisq, everything is in Java, and especially the DAO that requires good Java skills. It's very complex. But there might be some other stuff like with the Explorer. Nothing high prior at the moment, so I don't want to put too much effort from my side or SQ's side on it. But yeah, I will think a little bit about it if there's something else. I have the feeling that FOSSE is probably not worth the effort, and probably takes so much time that when it's ready, we don't need it anymore. I assume. I mean, you can try it. I don't want to stop you with this if you want to do it, but
I was thinking about the Explorer as well, because right now I'm just playing with the setup on Rectest and stuff like that. And I saw that the full Bisq node is using the block notify from Bitcoin. And were you thinking about using 0MQ or?
I'd never had time to look closer into it, how exactly it works, and from the Java side and so on. Would be interested someday when it can do the same what we are. I mean, we are just getting basically the event when there's a new block with the block notify, so a very simple API. The 0MQ is much more powerful when I think it's not really a replacement for RPC from the features as far as I've seen.
Yeah, it's not a replacement, but I'm using ZeroMQ with my block explorer that I'm developing. And it's like really easy. You just expose a TCP socket and you tell to which events you want to subscribe to. And there are like 3 events: new block, new transaction. I mean, 4 events. You can either receive the whole block or just the block hash, the whole transaction, or the transaction hash. These 4 things you can subscribe to, and you will get it. And that's all.
Okay.
So this we could have like our nodes having ZeroMQ exposed, and like other Bisq nodes could connect to it and not run their own node or something like that.
Yeah, that would be definitely interesting to. I mean, so far I mean, sometimes I have seen some issues that the seed node got stuck at some blocks, but I think it's related to reorgs, that in some reorg cases, basically just a code issue in the Java, on the Java part. But it could be also that the block notify maybe at some point doesn't work, or so. I don't know yet. I mean, it's very important that this is super stable. Yeah, that we don't have any risks that are once in a week or once in a month that this notification doesn't work, because then the seed node gets stuck basically and misses a block. And I'm not sure if ZeroMQ would be more stable or more risky, because I mean it's more complex. So at the end, probably it could add more risk, like the block notifies super basic. But would be interesting topic to investigate and see how it works from the code side in a small Java application also, to test it out.
I can show it to you once if you want. How to use it. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I mean, I will not have time until we are really stable with the DAO everything, because there's so much high priority stuff and all this stuff what's already working and where we don't have problems, which is just optimization. Well, here we don't even know if it's an optimization. It's for me, we cannot donate any time to this. But if you like, you can start to make a proposal for this with some. Would be good to have them basically a Java client where basically all the implementation is visible and so on. But another thing which might be more interesting, also we would basically like to have a block explorer, also easy one-click setup block explorer where a user can install on their server instance or local even, and to avoid these privacy issues when you click on the block explorer. Many block explorer companies are doing business with chain analysis companies, at least that can be assumed, because most don't have any business model how they earn money. So that's probably the way how they earn money, to sell the data. And then they know your IP, you're clicking 10 times on different transactions, so they know you are probably interested in those transactions. So probably either your addresses or you have received something from those addresses also. And we are using Blockstream Block Explorer by default, and we assume and hope that Blockstream is not doing shady business. But even better would be when the user can basically just install their own Block Explorer. Very simple at them. Of course, there are already projects where you can do it, but for non-developers, it's probably too difficult. So to have basically really a one-click script run, and then it installs everything, and you have your local Block Explorer, and that you can use then as default Block Explorer for Bisq. So you're not losing privacy anymore on this side. And then it would be good to maybe combine or have a clone of this Block Explorer, which is dedicated for BSQ. But the best way would be when this Block Explorer understands BSQ as well and shows the full transaction, but then can tag transactions at what they are, like a compensation request transaction and so on. And if the outputs are BSQ or Bitcoin. And from the UI and from usability, I find their Blockstream Block Explorer is one of the best what I've seen so far. So if you're interested in this project, that would be cool. It's nothing high prior at the moment, but I think it would be really nice to have. I mean, the current Block Explorer works basically. I think it has a few smaller issues, but basically it works. But it's not very intuitive to use, and it would be good to have really the full transaction in a intuitive way, like on the Blockstream, Block Explorer, or Blockchain Info. I think has very good UX, but I assume they are for sure on the shady business side. I would not trust them to not sell the data. But a Block Explorer like this, when it's in my opinion, many Block Explorer are not very intuitive, and when you really want to understand what was going on in this transaction, it's a little bit complicated to follow. Goody, let's jump back to the DAO stuff. Christoph, I think you wanted to say something. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's nothing directly related to the DAO, as it's somehow related. It's about the release that we were planning for this week. So at the moment, I have the feeling it's kind of unrealistic to do a release tomorrow, because we have a couple of pull requests that we want to get in, like the restore of the wallet for Windows. The UI stuff where Pedro just did the redesign. I would be able to finish that off, but I think he is still also working on the website, which should be also available when this release goes out. So what about that we are trying to have a code freeze until tomorrow, end of business, and then release on Monday or Tuesday, and try to testing, because so I think it doesn't make sense to push super hard tomorrow, because it should be a release where we communicate already in the mainnet client that the DAO is available. So we do expect more people to test at Bisq DAO and testnet, and for that, I guess everything that we can push in that makes it more stable and better to use. It would be worse to wait a couple of days. What's your take?
No, I completely agree. And the trade limit change also is a little bit more complex as I expected. That requires maybe another half a day or whatever. And let's take the time what we need, and maybe try to make a code freeze for tomorrow also. Sounds good.
Yeah. So besides that, nothing special from my side.
It would be good when we get a little bit more test support, because usually you're nearly and Devin are the only guys who are really testing. I mean, I try to do it also, but last release I also couldn't help with testing. And it would be good when basically all developers are donating half a day or so for helping testing, because everybody has a different approach how to use the software. It has a positive side effect that you learn more about the software from different angles and get more used, and then find more stuff what you could improve in your domain or whatever. So I think it would be good. Of course, it's not the funniest work for most developers, at least for me. I don't like testing really. But I think, it's important to, and I think this release is again carrying quite a lot of changes, and a few changes are a little bit more risky. So we need to have a proper test cycle to not risk anything. And it would be cool if we get a broader test community. I don't know which tool we want to use. I think the online tool didn't really work well. It was more complicated.
It depends. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do the follow-up call with Devin. I promised to do it, but I just forgot, to be honest. So the tool, it worked okay. The problem I had is I had performance issues with the user interface. So it froze a lot and it consumed lots of resources. So it was kind of hard to use for me. Maybe there is let's say reduced interface, an easier interface for our testing purpose. But I guess Devin has a better idea if there are any tools out there that we could reuse.
Yeah, maybe you check out with Devin.
I will try to ping Devin, and then we should be able to tell on Thursday or Friday which tool we want to use for the next cycle.
Otherwise, we can also go back to the spreadsheet. That was simple and easy at the end. I mean, I'm not a super fan of this overhead where you already need a half an hour to get registered and understand the tool and whatever. And then it was painful with getting, it was invite only or whatever. So yeah, it was kind of like, for me, it was a bad experience with this tool, but I didn't use it then also. But anyway, I leave it to you and Devin what to use there. And yeah, it would be especially good when every developer, when they're when they're testing their code change, what they have worked on, like Florian, everything which is related to Tor and network stuff, or for Oscar, everything related to Bitcoin with the seed node, for instance, in this release. Also to focus mainly on, especially on this, because that's what you have done. You know the best where could be problems, how to test it best, and then make a general test to make a few trades. Especially also backward compatibility is important to test with one instance from from the latest release. Either run it from the binary, or you have, as I usually do it, with two different IntelliJ instances, where one I have the latest release checked out and start from there, one node, and then I have another IntelliJ instance with the release candidate, and then to trade in between and see if it works in both directions. It can be that it has quite a few complications when you do a trade. It has slightly difference if you're the buyer or if you're the maker, if you're the buyer and the maker, or if you're the buyer and the taker, or on the other side, if you're the seller as the maker or the seller as the taker. So basically there are four roles which have different implementation. I mean, I think in this release we don't have much changes in the trade area. So beside the payment, the trade limit, that has to be tested well. But just to give a little bit a broader context about the testing. So it's not enough to just make one trade where you are, Alice is the buyer and then Bob is the seller, or Alice is the buyer as maker and Bob is the seller as taker. You also have to do it in the other way around. And another use case is then with arbitration to make some disputes and check if the disputes are, if the payout is working from the dispute and everything. So those are the main use cases which have to work always with every release, the smoke tests. And then, of course, the concrete changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, anything else?
Let's do it like that.
Anybody want to discuss or talk about? I mean, it can be also something non-DAO related now. We can talk whatever.
No, actually, I do have some DAO related stuff. The question is, what do we want to monitor for the DAO? Maybe we should start thinking about that.
Also, I have a own kind of private monitoring node at the moment, which I use only for myself, and SQ maybe use it for checking the seed nodes. As we have at the moment, I think 6 DAOs testnet seed nodes, and it seems that they're stable now. So what I request from the seed node and what I monitor are the normal peer-to-peer network data, like in the normal monitoring, and the number of offers and everything, and the number of blocks. I don't remember exactly, I think from the Genesis or, so I make a request, give me all your blocks, and then I see how many blocks every node has. So at one seed node would have a problem that it got stuck at one block and don't get updated to the next block anymore. Then you will see one seed node is behind, and you have to check what happened there. Beside that, I wanted to implement something like a chain of hashes where the complete DAO state also when a passing of a block is complete, then we are creating a hash of this state at this block of the DAO state, and we are connecting it in a chain, like a blockchain at the end. All these hashes and with the block number or the block hash, and to have such a data structure. And then we have with the hash we have basically one data item which represents the full state, and when the hashes are not exactly the same between different nodes, we see that something is out of sync and there are some issues. I didn't have time yet to implement this, and I'm not 100% sure if I find time before the release to do it, but it's not consensus. It's basically kind of like a monitoring system, so it's not really part of consensus, but it will help us for normal Bisq clients and for the seed nodes and for the monitoring of the seed nodes to detect immediately when there is some inconsistency. Some inconsistency are expected, like in real cases when you get a different block from different chains, you are very likely inconsistent. Actually, not very likely, because only when you have different transactions, when the transactions are the same in both blocks, then you probably have the same data, but it can be. And sorry, I forgot a very important data, the peer-to-peer network payload data, like the blind votes and the compensation, the proposal data. Those have caused in the last releases many issues, that some people didn't have this data and so on, and then the vote results were invalid. So that's very important to have. It's peer-to-peer network data, so there's never 100% consistency. So it's okay when some nodes have less data. So, but the seed node should have basically always the same data. So we are republishing this data with a very high resilience. So a node which is always online should have basically always the same data. Otherwise, we have to find out what's the reason. Those are very important for the monitoring. Somebody want to say something, Florian, to you?
So we do the integration, the monitoring after the release. Yeah,
it would be actually, I mean, we would need a monitor for the testnet, because this data is not available on mainnet and will not help when you're expecting empty data. And yeah, we would need basically a second version of your monitoring environment for testnet, but it would be good to have this before the mainnet launch already in place. So maybe you could put this actually a high priority so that we get it ready before, as soon as possible, basically, but before we are going live, because it's very important to spot very quickly when there are some problems, that we can find it quickly and restart the seed node and fix the issue or whatever.
By going live, you do not mean the release we just discussed next week?
No, the mainnet, or maybe, I mean, my target is mid of March, but probably will be more end of March. We'll see how. As soon as we are 100% stable on testnet, that we don't find any issues anymore, that's the main requirement. And as soon we have all the education and the documentation and communication material ready, and that our users that we have reached our users when we go live, that they understand the DAO and know about the DAO. That's another requirement. So, but basically, when everything goes good, in the best case, I think it can be end of March.
Okay.
One thing, Manfred, use cases like the unlocking of bonds, where do we want to monitor that? For example, if there's a bond for a role locked and someone just wants to get out, and he wants to get out because he did something wrong, and we want to confiscate the bond, how do we get notified by that? Or do we just monitor it manually?
I would say we, at the moment, I mean, the whole bonding and all the advanced features, besides the pure voting and compensation requests, I would keep a little bit on low priority from the usability. And I mean, there need to be added better usability, like that you know exactly which bond to confiscate and so on. But I mean, especially the confiscation is very exceptional. It probably will never happen at all. So I would not put too much emphasis on this, just as it basically works on the consensus part, because everything which is in the consensus part cannot be changed without breaking the DAO. But everything which is on the usability part and how we connect this data with the external data on GitHub, that's important, as we need to have some backups, for instance, for all the compensation requests. It would be, also Devin discussed this already somewhere on GitHub, and I think it would be good to have, and I think there are systems where you can monitor some web page, and with every change of the web page, you're creating a new version in a Git commit, and you get the Git history of the changes of this web page. So basically, for every compensation request, we could monitor the whole repo there, and every change get a commit, and basically everything is in a history. And when this is a alternative system beside GitHub, then we are not depending on GitHub as well when they would deplatform us and lock up all the data or whatever, that this historical data is still available, and also that we can verify if there was a change, for instance, when a user in the last minute changed the amount what he requested. And that would be kind of like a little bit of social cheating, that people review it and say, okay, and then they do the voting without checking it again at the last moment, and at the last moment he has changed it to a different value or whatever. I don't expect that. I mean, such stuff will be handled basically on the social level. Such a contributor will never receive any we probably never get accepted anymore when he tried to cheat the other stakeholders. So I think that's all not really critical. I think everything what we really need to focus is everything which is on the consensus area and on the stability area. And so far we had mainly issues on the stability area. And I mean, these bugs with the vote result were not 100% consensus bugs, but somewhere in between. And
No, Manfred, what I meant with the unlocking of bonds, I didn't meant the user interface, how to unlock a bond and this kind of stuff. I meant the use case. For example, we have a DNS maintainer. The maintainer has to lock, I don't know, 50,000 BSQ. He changes the DNS entry and points to a scam site to scam people, and then he tries to get his BSQ bond out in time before we recognize the scam attempt. And my question was how we monitor the unlock transactions of the bonds, so that someone tries to.
As in the UI, you would see it when something got unlocked. And I mean, such stuff should be discovered very quickly, and the unlock time will be long enough, something like minimum 2 months, or maybe 3 or 4 months.
Okay, then it shouldn't be a problem, yeah. Okay.
There shouldn't be a risk. And I'm not sure if we really will use the bonds initially, because it's not really hardly required, and it adds a little bit of risk when there is a bug and so on. I mean, I don't know yet. It's for me not a high priority. I mean, the important stuff what need to work is the compensation requests, the trading fee payment, and the trading of BSQs. Those 3 areas, I think, are the minimum viable version. What we really need to get 100% safe and stable, and all the rest we can use a little bit later when we have a little bit more time for testing and feel more confident with it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I just left everything in, for the people learn about it and for feedback and for testing and everything. I'm not 100% sure if I was considering to deactivate all the advanced features. I'm not 100% sure if that is easy and would introduce even more risk. Probably the easiest is just that we don't use it. And there will be anyway the policy when, because of bugs, some BSQ get burned, like, you make a bond and then there is a bug and suddenly your BSQ got burned, then you can make a reimbursement request and you get it refunded basically For the network, it doesn't matter. When some BSQ got burned and then got issued, it's a zero sum. And when there is a clear case that it was not your mistake or whatever, or your bad intention, when it's a software bug, then yeah, we will fix it like that. Yeah, one thing what I want to explain a little bit more, which maybe is not completely trivial to understand, is how the peer-to-peer network data and the Bitcoin transactions are working together, because that's a core concept of the DAO, which makes it very different to smart contract platforms like Ethereum. Also, we are using the blockchain basically as notary system, where we are timestamping our important events and data, and we are connecting this data, which lives in the peer-to-peer network, as we are using our peer-to-peer network, our peer-to-peer network as a second layer network, where we are distributing all the rich data, the network payload data, like the blind vote or the compensation request. And to link both together, in the peer-to-peer network, we don't have the guarantee that every node receives the same data. It's eventually consistency, and we cannot, we don't have a guarantee for that. On the Bitcoin blockchain, we have the guarantee. When a block is at least 10 blocks deep or so, we can be sure it will not be changed. It's there forever, and it's frozen there. And everybody can get this blockchain data, and we can assume, we can guarantee that everybody has the same data. And how to combine those is over that the hash of the payload, network payload, get added in the op return of the Bitcoin transaction, and the Bitcoin transaction ID get added to the peer-to-peer network data. Of course, you cannot do it at the same time, because you would have a chicken and egg problem. You cannot create the hash without so the transaction ID is not part of the hash, because otherwise, you cannot create the hash and then put it in the transaction, and it changed the transaction ID when you would change the op return, so it wouldn't work. So the transaction ID get added afterwards. That's not included in the hash, but that's not an issue. And with that, we have the security of the Bitcoin blockchain and the consistency, the guarantee that the data are there, and the rich data. We don't want to spam the blockchain with encoding data in the blockchain. The rich data are living on the peer-to-peer network, and every user is receiving this anyway over the Bisq peer-to-peer network. And that's the way how this plays together. And there is one thing which is a little bit complex, but maybe I'll try to explain it. Don't be too worried when you don't understand it. It's really a little bit tricky, but it's a very important concept, which was one of the reasons of the last voting rounds failures, because we cannot guarantee that all the peer-to-peer network data has arrived at everybody, and you cannot decrypt, or you don't know what somebody has voted without the peer-to-peer network data. So everybody will get all their transaction data, but for decrypting the blind vote, you need the peer-to-peer network data. When you have not received this, or when maybe a malicious peer has not published it to other peers, or has only published it to a colluding small group of peers, then you would run into different vote results, because some peers can decrypt this data and will include this vote to the total result, and that might be different in the end result. Maybe a compensation request get accepted or not get accepted because of this one vote. And to ensure that everybody has the same data view, everybody every voter at the vote reveal is using the peer-to-peer network data, what they have at this moment for this phase, for this cycle. So let's say I received 10 different blind vote data from the network, and Christoph received only 9. So when we would, at the end, create the vote result, we would have basically a potentially different vote result and would be inconsistent. So we have to be sure that either 9 or 10 is the truth, and yeah, it doesn't actually matter. It just has to be clear that there's only one valid data set. And to determine which data set is the winning, if mine 10, or if my list of 10 blind votes is the valid data set, or the 9 from Christoph, we are using a kind like a voting by stake. So when I voted in my blind vote with 10,000 BSQ and Christoph voted with 5,000 BSQ, then I have a higher stake and my data view would be the winner. Of course, it's not only we two, there are many others, and the sum, let's say that 80% of the network has 10 data objects and 20% have only 9, and then the sum of the stake which were used by those who have 10 gets summed up, and when this is the majority, then this is the winner. And then for the vote result, you have to get all 10 blind vote peer-to-peer network data to create the vote result. When you don't have it, you request it from the network, and when you don't get it for whatever reason, you cannot create the vote result, because you would potentially come to a different result, and that has to be avoided. And by this we guarantee basically from the Bitcoin side, because this data is in the Bitcoin transaction, also the stake, it's the input for the for the vote reveal transaction, and the vote reveal transactions there is no peer-to-peer network data for this, so that's purely in the blockchain. So from there we have basically a consistent voting on what is the majority data view, and that is the one which will be used for the result. And that has to be, to avoid some attack scenario, we require that it has 80% of the network have to be in the majority, and that we have this issue because of some bugs that there was just a minority, or that the majority of the data view didn't reach 80% of the total stake. It was maybe just 60% or even less, and then the whole voting cycle is invalid. And that's basically a kind of like emergency case when we have, like we had network issues and bugs, and then the whole voting round is rendered invalid, and basically is no change in anything. And we just have to repeat. It's not a big issue at the end, because compensation requests can be just repeated. It's a little bit annoying, of course, but it's at least better like to have inconsistency or possible attacks that somebody with a minority could abuse this to attack the DAO and get then some compensation requests accepted by withholding some data and whatever weird attack scenarios. I'm not sure if I could explain it good. It's quite complicated, and so you can read it up in the document if you want to know. Again, I just mentioned it because it was now relevant in the last voting results, and it's an important concept to guarantee that we have consistency from the peer-to-peer network data for the vote result. Did I manage to confuse everybody completely? Is it more or less totally clear?
Yeah.
Is it more or less clear, or is it very? So I don't expect that you fully understand it, because it's really quite complicated, and you have to maybe draw it down to really understand the steps and to have it internalize this process with the blind vote and the vote reveal and which data and the transactions and so on. It's not trivial.
Right, but the main idea is that we don't know which data exist for people in the Bisq P2P network, because unlike Bitcoin, nothing there is promised, and we want to know what the majority has, and majority here is 80%. So we use blockchain for voting on what the majority has. That's one thing that blockchain is good for, is voting.
Yeah, exactly. And here we use only the stake, because the merit, that was one of the bugs also. The merit is already a part of the peer-to-peer network data, and we cannot rely on any peer-to-peer network data. So here the pure stake is used. So when you, and that's a little bit something important, which is a little bit complicated to communicate to the user. But when you're a contributor who has earned a lot of merit over the time, so you have maybe whatever 100 or 200 BSQ already as merit, you don't need to use a lot of stake for voting because your merit gives you already a lot of weight. But for this majority hash, only the stake is used. So when you would decide to vote only with 100 BSQ, you might end up in the minority data view, and then your vote can be still valid. You just need to request the data. So at the end, it's not a big issue, but it reduces a little bit the security from. I would have preferred to have the merit part in there as well, because we can assume that the people who have earned a lot of merit are not trying to cheat the system. When somebody buy 1 million BSQ on the market, we don't know. Maybe it's an attacker from a state agency who try to do any bullshit. But anyway, I think it's a more exotic problem. The real problems are probably stability and bugs, software bugs or consensus bugs.
One question, Manfred. Do we see it as a problem? So if the Bitcoin network, the mining fees go up a lot, so that people might be reluctant and not to vote or to do anything in the DAO, that it freezes the state?
I think there are fees anyway in BSQ, and those people, voting is a management task for the contributors mainly. We don't want that any user is participating in voting and has no clue what he's voting on. So it requires work at the end to read the requests and know what to vote. There might be some popular votes like kick out the scammy altcoin also, where everybody has an opinion without a lot of research. But usually for compensation requests, it's important to know and to understand what was going on. And I think for contributors, it doesn't matter if it costs you $50 in voting when you earn $5,000. You basically, when it would be really expensive, you just add it to your earning that you want to earn a little bit more, because it costs you $50, $100 for doing the requests and the voting. When Bitcoin mining fee become really over long term very high, like $50, like we had, or $40 2 years ago in December for a few weeks, I think the Bisq trade protocol on-chain will be the main problem, because people maybe will not trade anymore when the current trade protocol with 4 transactions will become too expensive. So I think that's the main problem. And from the DAO side, I don't really see a big issue there. And it could be, the DAO is not built to last for 100 years or whatever, or this current version based on Bitcoin, because I expect that at some point the mining fee will be very high. Maybe not $50, but I think something like $20 is probably realistic, like Swift. I think it's similar like Swift. Also, Swift transaction doesn't cost $100, but it costs you probably $20 or $50. And that might be already long-term too expensive at some point. And then we have to see in a few years, maybe there are some kind of side chains or some alternative currencies where we can use. Maybe we get some privacy improvement, like using something like Monero or so. And to move over to a different blockchain wouldn't be such a big problem, because we have this way of burning and reimbursement. So when we would move now to Litecoin, which is technically nearly the same like Bitcoin, we could easily, basically, you have to prove that you have burned some BSQ in the Bitcoin blockchain. And with this proof, you have the right to issue or to get reimbursed on the new chain. That could be done manually, basically. Also with this tool what we have for proof of burn, you can prove it that you have burned it, and you could sign something, and then the stakeholders could manually basically verify it. Could be automated, of course, then also. So I think conceptually it's not really a big issue to have a kind of like a swap by burning on one chain and issuing on the other side. And then you empty out the old chain and you're filling out the new chain, and there might be some price fluctuations and some weirdness a little bit in this time when the supply of a chain is falling down extremely. But I think beside that, technically, there shouldn't be big issues.
Yeah, makes sense. One last question regarding the peer-to-peer data that we're using. Was there in the beginning of the conceptual phase any time the discussion to not do it, not store it in the peer-to-peer network itself that is used for trading as well, but use stuff like IPFS or something, a different protocol for this kind of data?
So one thing is I started actually with doing the voting on the blockchain with a bitmap where you basically one bit is for voted okay and not voted okay. Then a second bit is for if you have voted or not voted at all. And it would have avoided this problem with connecting the peer-to-peer network data with the blockchain. But once I think, we would have filled up the op return to the maximum, and it would have been limited. It would have only, I think, something like 20 or 30 requests you can vote on with this. So when we have 50 or 100 requests, you cannot vote on all. You would have need to make several transactions, which would have complicated the whole process. And you are not flexible at all when you do anything on the blockchain. It's super limited what you can do. You have compressed everything as far as possible, and any change or whatever, you cannot do usually. So actually, I'm happy that we moved away from this. And regarding IPFS, when I moved away from the first DHTs, which I was using at the beginning, which never was stable on the real internet. I looked into alternatives like IPFS and Bitmessage as well, and I had the impression that IPFS is not built for the use case what we need. It's more like BitTorrent for big files, permanent storage. We usually don't want to have permanent storage for most data. It's only the trade statistics which are really stored permanently. And it was lacking many features what we needed for validating that you can prove that you are the owner of the data. It has all the DHT-based peer-to-peer network systems have serious Sybil and Eclipse attacks problems. So you could partition the network easier. With a flat field network like Bitcoin itself or like our peer-to-peer network, you are much more resilient. It's much harder to attack such a network. I mean, I would not say it's much harder because, I mean, you can DDoS it and so on, but at least you cannot, it's much more resilient regarding Sybil and Eclipse attacks.
Maybe I can say something about IPFS. IPFS is a good tool to save content that you already know what is it, because it takes a content and gives it a name. That's not our case. We trying to decide what is the content. So I wouldn't know off the top of my head how would IPFS help us. Once we decide on a block, we can store it in IPFS, but we can also store it on a server. I mean, once the decision is made, it's not really important where is the data actually stored.
Yeah, and we have some temporary data, like when you make a proposal, you can remove the proposal as well. With IPFS, basically, probably you can also remove it, but it's more, it's more that you're putting some data with the hash in the network, and there it sits. And we want to remove it. So after the temporary proposal payload in this time, in the proposal phase, which can be removed, that has a time to live of 1 month or 2 months. And after this, it gets removed from the network because in the blind vote phase, it gets persisted then, and then it really gets stuck. But the first object, we don't need.
So IPFS is not immutable. Don't worry. So,
sorry.
Immutable, so you can remove stuff. I mean, this shouldn't worry you. It's not immutable. So what you are afraid that you put there something that stays forever, but this is immutability, and this is not IPFS. Of course, stuff can be removed if you stop hosted. It's basically removed.
Yeah, and I think it was also mainly, I think it runs over UDP, which doesn't work with Tor. I think theoretically they support transport agnostic, so you could run it also over TCP. But in practice, when you try to run a DHT system over TCP, you get very bad performance because UDP is much faster, and they're doing a lot of management messages, which should be super fast. And yeah, when you move everything to TCP, I assume that you get performance issues. I'm not sure if it's an if the interoperability, if other nodes which are not configured to use TCP would work, probably it can then only work with nodes which you are trying to spawn, and basically the same what we have now with the Bisq users are the only nodes in the Bisq network. So yeah, at the end, I'm pretty happy that we build our own peer-to-peer network, because also very important part is that we are now super flexible. When we need a new feature, and all the time I needed new features, like now for the DAO, I just code it up and that's it. And I understand the system with the old peer-to-peer network with this DHT, which were very well designed and everything, a good code, but it was a huge, big project, and I never managed to get to the level to really fix things and extend it or so. This similar like with Bitcoin J, it's basically half a year work or so to get really so deep into this library that you're something like a core maintainer can change and fix stuff. And of course, with peer-to-peer network, it's the job of Florian at the moment to get deep into this, and it's also takes some time. But for me, it was at the end. I mean, when there would have been an alternative which would have fit exactly to our use cases, I would have used it, but it was mainly the lack of alternative. That's why I built DAO myself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for explaining.
So maybe one thing about it, if there would ever be some kind of good decentralized storage, this could have, I mean, we could use it, but right now, IPFS is not exactly decentralized storage. You can just put stuff and forget about it. This is not how it works. And all the stuff it's supposed to be like that, like Swarm and SIA, they just don't work very well yet. So it's not an alternative. If at some point they would work, maybe.
Naiman, you are a little bit more familiar with the Ethereum space, because I was wondering this time also, to look into Swarm and Whisper. I think it was a project, but I'm not sure if they ever got really implemented, or what's the state with these systems. They wanted to build a kind of like peer-to-peer network for different use cases.
Whisper is just a message sending system, like the thing that we use with Tor. So you can use the Ethereum P2P to send messages between nodes. That's Whisper. It's nothing about storage. Swarm is in development. It's not ready yet. So it's a nice project. It's just not even close to be mature yet.
And how does Whisper deal with when the user is not online? So when I want to send you a trade message and you're not online?
I don't know, because I don't know. I mean, some point I looked at that, but I don't know, because I think that Whisper was a concept that we had in the beginning, and I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody really uses it right now. So it was kind of an idea for the beginning. We already have a P2P network. Let's also use like BitMessage. I think it wasn't used, and then it was kind of left behind. Swarm, however, is developed, but it's just not mature yet to really be used.
Yeah, a lot of great concepts and white papers and great presentations, but at the end not running code. That's a little bit typical, I think.
No comment.
I also shouldn't comment on this too much bad mood between the Bitcoin and the Ethereum camp. At the end, a little bit stupid. So, yeah. Is anything else anybody want to discuss?
Not from my side.
Wrap up. I don't know what we should discuss next week. Is anything from your side what you would like to bring in? I mean, the trade protocol is one of the main priorities, but depends on Craig. How Neumann, have you heard something from him regarding his health issues?
He's gonna see a doctor tomorrow, and we are going to be smarter afterwards.
Yeah.
So tomorrow evening, I hope we see.
Do you think the tech spec is finished or end of the week, so that the idea was that everybody is reading the tech spec and has a good idea about the new trade protocol and basically reviewing it as a really critical review and help to find issues if there are any issues.
Let's say by Monday it should be ready. It's okay.
Yeah, that would work. So when Monday it's ready and when Craig is good until Wednesday, maybe we could try to plan it for next week. Otherwise, we can do it in 2 weeks when it's don't want to stress too much with this.
Yeah. I mean, let's see tomorrow with Craig. Nobody knows that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's keep it open. When I mean, the other topic is the unit test frameworks. I think Florian, you said that you could prepare a little bit of overview and basic for discussion.
Yes, I will start a proposal, I think, when the monitor release is out.
Yeah, so it's also nothing urgent. Or Christoph, is from your side anything? Maybe we could also about the UI part. Maybe that's also would be good that everybody, because there are many areas, like especially for Craig, he will touch a lot of the UI stuff. So it would be good to get a little bit of a better idea about the concepts and frameworks, and especially with the new UI framework, what we're using this, how it's called?
The JPhoenix. Yeah, maybe the one after, because if you want to do the release on Monday, Tuesday, I'm not sure if I have sufficient time to make a proper presentation on that.
Yeah. Let's keep it open. I mean, we can also skip it next week or so when nothing is really ready, or just have without the bigger agenda and just discuss whatever it's up for discussion.
I could talk about the release process.
Yeah. Let's do this. Yeah, that's a good point. And a little bit maybe with testing and the release and because there was some discussions regarding Snap packaging. I have not really followed up and don't know much about this, and it's probably an interesting infrastructure and so on. But I think it's important to really understand the security issues with releases. I mean, when somebody would manage to introduce malware either on the hosting side or in the release process, it would be terrible. And I'm not sure if that's really well understood by every developer to the same extent, at least. And basically, we would like to get, maybe that's something also for Tomasz. I'm not sure, it's a little bit maybe too much Java related, but we would like to get a deterministic build. I think the jar file is already deterministic. At least we are creating a hash. We are not really checking it, but we are uploading it also, so everybody could run it and could create the jar file, and it should have the same hash. But then to create the binary, it's not trivial, because especially on OS X it has the signature also. I'm not sure how this can work, but we should look into this more when we have somebody who is very experienced with build systems and such stuff, and look into Gideon build, how it's done on Bitcoin. They have the same issue, they're assigning the binary, so then there will be some solution for this. And also the goal is basically to have a deterministic build, and everybody could build it locally and get to the same hash, and they can verify that what we've uploaded is the same binary. And with that, we would add a lot of security for, even if the infrastructure would get compromised, we could even have then somewhere extra, kind of like a monitor server, which is doing the build and verify that the software is always the same, which is on the download page and so on. But yeah, let's make this a topic for next week, release and testing and the security issues. And maybe we find somebody who want to to start working on this. Maybe I will try to invite Noel G. He is very good with this, and I think he was interested also in that area. And I think no, there was a past contributor who is not much active anymore, but maybe I could try to reach out to him. I think he was starting also to look into this. Thomas, also if you are experienced with this area or to look into GTM build also, you're welcome as well, of course. It just, I think it requires quite a little bit of Java and JVM knowledge, and packager. So it's very related how the binary is really built in our system. And I don't know if you have then the expertise for this, but
well, I was planning to look into the GTM build of Bitcoin, but Java, we will see.
I mean, I think an important part is to find a conceptual solution, like for the code signing. For Windows, we don't have a code signing yet, but that's also on our to-do list, basically, to get code signing for Windows. On Linux, it doesn't exist, but on OS X and Windows, we would have the problem that, you have the signature from the developer and you cannot create the signature on a GTM build also. So I don't know exactly how this can work, but Bitcoin has found a solution for this, and maybe it's just that you exclude some files and ignore basically this data from creating the hash. So, but if you're already familiar with GTM build, that would be interested to find out how we could, what is needed, how we could apply this, and so on, how to get someday to a deterministic build. There is another thing. Ginal had set up the hosting and everything basically for Rocket Chat, for an alternative for Slack. And I don't know exactly, it got stuck then. I think it was mainly that there was still no mail server for the invite, for the registration part. And I'm not sure if Alexei or if Steve were the guy who were trying to work on that part. I think Steve is very busy now with all the communication part. So Thomas, if you are kind of experienced with server setup, and I think it was basically to get the mail server or some system which allows us to handle the email registration part for getting into Rocket Chat. From G0, I have not heard since a while. I can try to contact him, but I assume he is very busy with his day job. But it's a little bit of pity. It's already 3-4 months idle and not used, and would be good to move over to that at some point, as I will not have time to work on to add much on this. But basically, it would be good when somebody takes the lead for this and that we get this this transition done. And there are a few this webhooks with GitHub and so on. So should be basically that everything which works on Slack now would work with Rocket Chat, and maybe for Florence and relevant also for the notification system with Slack, that this will work with Rocket Chat as well. I think it will work. I think it's basically a copy of the features of Slack, but it has to be checked out and tested before we are moving. Yeah, let's wrap up then, already quite long. And I will update I will create a new issue for next week with these topics, and let's target maybe then the trade protocol for 2 weeks, that we handle it in 2 weeks, and the UI maybe then the week afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, then thanks everybody for watching and being in the call, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.